flew with the old man. Year 51, the Oriskany. You're a lot like he was, only better. He's a natural, heroic son of a bitch.
Just hold them off for a few seconds. There's a formation. There. Let it loose. They're right behind me. There. I can't hold them.
Oh boy, it is coming down out there. Florida in the summer. Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Divers Ready. I hope you enjoyed that footage from my 2 dives on the Oriskany last weekend, the biggest artificial reef in the world and one of only a few diveable aircraft carriers on the planet. If you landed on this video to see some epic dive footage of the Oriskany, thanks so much for stopping by. Subscribe if you feel like it, and I hope to see you again. But if you're trying to plan a trip to dive the Oriskany, keep watching, because I figured I could add some value here and share with you my 5 key lessons that I learned last weekend about diving the mighty O. Number 1, it's dark and murky. Bring lights, bring lots of lights. The visibility is typically actually alright. It's typically 40 to 60 feet, 12 to 18 meters, but there is a layer of cruddy, muddy wash off from the land water that just sits on the surface down to about 30 feet or 9 meters, and that blocks a lot of direct sunlight from hitting the wreck. So it does appear to be generally pretty murky, even though the water quality at depth is quite good. As you can see from the footage, the videos that we had was pretty mediocre when we were there. We did 2 dives over the weekend, one on Saturday conducted in kind of bluish water, and then one on Sunday in greenish water. And yeah, I didn't even bother to colour match the clips so you can tell what was shot on Saturday and what was shot on Sunday. Matthias would be so disappointed. Number 2, she is plenty deep. Of course, if you are a technical diver, you'll have fun. We had fun. The flight deck is about 150 feet or 45 meters deep, 200 feet, 60 meters to the sand. But the top of her superstructure, just a touch, just a boop, the very top of that wreck, that's 84 feet already, 25 meters deep. So if you're a recreational diver, make sure you're advanced certified so your insurance is valid and covered. Plan on diving nitrox, watch your limits, and plan for a long surface interval between dives if you're double dipping. If you are a recreational dive limit diver, it is still a great dive. I would still recommend it, but because the only thing that you would have access to is the superstructure, it's kind of a weird dive because you don't see the deck of the wreck at 150 feet, which therefore within limits means you've got just the superstructure, which is kind of short and narrow and vertical, and it kind of gives the feeling of diving like a tower block or an office building, which is pretty cool. 3, expect harsh conditions. We got very lucky with the weather, the literal calm before the storm, and I want to send out my best regards to all of my friends in North Florida dealing with the hurricane that just passed through there, particularly my friends at Dive Right and Dive Soft and all the other dive companies based up in Cave Country. I hope you guys are all holding up okay. But as we said, we got the literal calm before the storm. We had beautiful flat surface conditions, as you saw in those video clips. Usually, so our local guides told us, you should expect rough surface conditions and strong currents, but we got lucky. We didn't have any of that. However, I was very glad that I bought my DPV. It was a choice I made before I drove the 10 hours from Miami to Pensacola as to whether to bring my big camera rig or my DPV, and I'm glad that I chose the DPV. All of the footage you just watched was shot on a GoPro mounted on my scooter. She is an aircraft carrier. She's over 1,000 feet long, and we had only 2 dives to see as much as we could. So bring a DPV if you have one. My buddy Nick and I both had DPVs, but this other CCR diver on the boat with us didn't, and he asked if he could join our group because he didn't have a buddy, and we said sure if you can swim really fast, and then he looked sad. By the way, if you want to meet and dive with Nick and his pet mullet, they will be joining me on our Truck Lagoon trip next November, details down below. So if you give him a carrot, he might even let you pet it. Matter of fact is that this was actually my 4th time planning an Oriskany trip in the last 6 years, and the first time I ever actually left Miami to go and do it. The first 3 times we'd get a call on the Thursday before the weekend, don't bother driving up lads, it ain't gonna happen, she's a blowing out there, I'm cancelling now. So for us, 4th time is a charm. And yes, we absolutely were playing Destroy the Death Star in those catapult channels on the deck. That's exactly what you thought we were doing is what we were doing. Absolute. And there was no conversation that took place about that. Nick and I looked at each other and were like, yeah, we're totally running our scooters through those little catapult channels and pretending that we're destroying the Death Star. That is happening. Fourth thing you gotta know is it's a long boat ride out. The Gulf Coast of Florida is very shallow for a long way offshore, so they had to sink the Oriskany 22 miles offshore to find the 200 feet, 60 meters of depth they required to get her underwater and make her not a navigational hazard. The boat ride was about 90 minutes each way. There is of course no service, cell service that far offshore, so maybe bring a book. I don't know. And a long boat ride means more fuel, which means this is not a cheap trip. We paid $250 per person per half day just for our boat spaces. And I get it. Pensacola is a huge Navy town. I can't help but feel that if the US Navy had weighed the economic benefits over the sentimental nostalgia and sunk the Oriskany somewhere more touristic, you know, like the Florida Keys, maybe, the wreck would have been dived a ton more and the state would have reaped in literally millions more dollars in tourist revenue. Plus, then you don't have to go that far offshore to find that kind of depth, and the boat ride out would be a lot cheaper, a lot faster, would have attracted more divers. It would have just been better, guys. I know I'm biased because I live in South Florida, I get it, but it would have been better. Logistically, this is a challenging wreck to dive, and I don't mean the aforementioned long boat ride or the cost or the dive conditions. Getting off the dock takes perseverance and strategic thinking that I was not fully prepared for. Our first boat broke down in the bay. Well, that can happen to anyone, no big deal. So we went back to the dock on one engine and scrambled to find spaces for the four of us on another charter boat. We just about managed that, but we had to book 2 different boats for the 2 half days of diving that we wanted to do. There are not a lot of charter options to go and see the world's largest artificial reef. And then getting fills. I asked our skipper on day one, where can we get Trimix fills? And he gives me a phone number to call. So I call the number and say, hey, do you guys fill Trimix? And the guy says, call back tomorrow. Click. I'm like, that's a yes, no answer question. Do you fill Trimix? Do you have helium? Yes or no? Apparently it's not that easy. So I called back the next day and I was like, hey, do you guys fill Trimix? And I got the phone passed around to a few different people, and then somebody eventually came on and was like, yeah, we got one guy we think can do it, but he don't work Saturdays, so you need to come in special for it. What time do you all need these fills? What? Oh, and no booster pumps, so they could only fill up to 2400 psi. And then the other dive shop in town had a booster pump, so they could do high pressure O2 fills for our stage bottles, but they didn't stock helium. So you have to run around town on a Hobbit-like quest to get all the stuff you need to go for the dive. Utter madness. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks as always so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. I hope you enjoyed this video on the Mighty O. If you did, give it a thumbs up and maybe share it with your dive buddy to inspire them to join you on a trip to go and dive the world's largest artificial reef. My name's James. I'll see you next time. Dive safe, dive often.